Welcome to the Neophyte in the Woods podcast with Andrew McDowell.
Welcome to another episode of the Neophyte in the Woods podcast. I'm your host, Andrew McDowell. We are proud members of the Change Your POV podcast network. I am here and in person with my good buddy, Michael J. Penney.
Hey, what's up?
How are you today, Michael?
Alive and well, another day above ground.
Well, that's delightful, and I'm happy that you're here. We haven't seen each other in...
Year and a half.
No, it was a year. Last November.
Last November. Yeah, a year, face to face, yeah.
When Trey shot my deer.
Yeah, that was kind of brutal, man.
That episode ran last week, and I'm still salty about it.
I don't blame you. That's okay. Trey and I haven't seen a single deer yet this year.
Yeah, it's been I think a little bit of a weird year for deer hunting. I know a lot of guys who are out in the woods and who are killing monsters, and like monsters, and then up here, folks just not seeing shit.
Yep.
Which, I get. It's a little bit frustrating, I think, for a lot of folks, especially because you have stuff on camera all year, and
then game day comes.
And then they disappear. Like turkeys, when I'm out hunting for turkeys. It's
right.
Super frustrating.
Well, yeah, like in North Carolina right now, the weather, of course, is really warm, and so whenever it dips below 30s at night, you know that they're going to be up and moving. But it's pretty surprising because, well, you've been there in the blind where, we killed that deer 11:30 a.m., something like that?
Yeah, it was probably right around noon.
I mean, it was a middle of the day kill, and normally you go out in the morning, you wait through sunrise. You go out in the evening, you wait through sunset.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing a lot more deer movement in the middle of the day. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that some of that has to do with the rut and all of that kind of stuff. We were right at the rut strikes late down there in rebel country, right?
Yeah.
And it goes much later as well. So, I mean, he was on the prowl. I don't think he was going looking for food or water when he strolled by. Yeah.
He was looking for something to stick.
Quite.
Yeah, man. Well, that's how Trey wound up shooting that other buck, too, is because he gave a little... the biggest thing in the rut that I've seen isn't necessarily doe, because there's doe aplenty. The biggest thing that I've seen in the middle of the rut that works is a kind of one of those like wah 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 wah.
Yeah, do the grunt thing.
Yeah, but do that little purr at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because that little purr is like, hey, baby, you want to do this?
It's kind of the tending thing. It's like,
right, right, exactly. You're gonna love this.
Love this, or at least be indifferent. I'm gonna love this.
Right. This is all for me.
This is all for me.
Yeah.
So your season has been... You've been out on Rob Elliott's farm, right?
No, actually. We're hunting on a buddy of ours, John Brady, who, by the way, entered the U.S. Army in like 1978 as a private and retired as a major.
Wow.
I mean, his war stories are awesome because he's talking about, dude, when I got to the Army, we had that all green polyester blend uniform, no boot bands or anything like this. And so he had gotten out for, I think it was a couple of years or something, and was coming back in He had some split time when he was getting his degree, but everything was tri-color and all of this new stuff. He's like, what? This is a whole brand new army. You know? Yeah, anyway, so we've been hunting out on John's land, and he's got a nice parcel of property that is, he owns the creek, is the easiest way to put it. And so right at the end of the creek, you can see, dude, there's rubs, there's scrapes, there's beds, just every possible buck sign that you could think of. Yeah. And we one day, Trey Caraway and I, who's been on Cigars and Sea Stories, we wound up going all the way over and across the creek and kind of popped up on this other side. And basically in between the creek and this other side of it's still wooded, but it's more open underneath. There's this heavy underbrush, which deer don't like moving through that stuff. They just don't.
Until up here, the late season, you hide it. You set up on that heavy stuff because that's the only place that go because they're so shell shocked from everybody shooting them for 2 months that like mid-December you're up in a tree, like in the thickest hellhole that you can find. Yeah, and that's where you shoot a deer.
Yep. See, and it's funny because we were on the other side of that thicket, so to speak, and there's this, I call it like a foliage gate, so to speak. There's a deer trail that's going in between foliage. I'm like, what the heck is that? And normally you wouldn't necessarily blow open a spot by just trudging right through the middle of a deer trail. But we had to figure out where the deer were moving, and essentially what it was is there's this big pocket of thick brush that goes along the edge of the creek, and there's 2 or 3 gates, essentially, that you can go through. And so what we noticed is they were coming through this one southerly gate, so to speak, and so we set up over on the other side. We're in there, we're quiet. It's great. And then all of a sudden I hear, and it's my guts turning over at like 4:30 in the morning. And Trey, he does the slow look over at me. He's like, bro. And just pulls this toilet paper out of nowhere and hands it to me. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be bad. Like real bad, right? You know, I'm like, I haven't shit in the woods in a while. I don't mind shitting in the woods. Don't get me wrong.
You're like a bear.
Oh yeah, it's totally fine. So long as you wipe your ass. I mean, I don't care. So I go out and I dig a cat hole, and I have it down to a science because, you know, I served overseas. God knows. Yeah. There were numerous times overseas where I needed to use the facilities without a facility in sight. And so I lean up against this tree. I dig a cat hole, right? Everything right at the base of the tree, and basically where this can be the key topic of the episode: how to shit in the woods. So, I look for a big mature tree that has the V of roots that's coming out from it. Dig a cat hole there, lean my back against it, and wow, I've never gone like that in the woods before. And so wind up, covering everything back up and making my way, back the other 60, it was probably about 60, 70 yards that I walked through the woods away from our deer site and stuff like that, away from our blind. And I get up over there. I'm like, oh my God, dude, that was brutal. And he's like, yeah, all right, sweet, glad you're back with me. And we're doing the whispering kind of a deal. And he's like, pretty sure I smell you off there deep in the woods, right? No sooner did he say that. Now, bear in mind that it's still dark out. It's still pitch black. We probably have another 30 minutes of light, or 30 minutes before light. We hear this, the but it's one of those where he got up and was kind of doing like this, left, right.
He's looking around.
What the hell's going on? Yeah. Right, but he was spooked and just blows us out. I'm like, no! And that was the first time we got blown out. And it's always man, I have no problem capping a mature doe.
Yeah.
Or any deer. I don't care. You got fur, you die. Getting blown out before you even have the ability to shoot, it's like the worst thing in the world, dude. Oh, it's heartbreaking. You pretty much just blew the hunt.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can blow back at them and they'll actually walk towards you. Mm-hmm. I've had that happen. Anytime you use a human voice, I notice that they wind up walking away, unless it's, well, you saw that one video where I shot the doe who was about to walk behind the tree. Yeah. That works, man.
Yeah.
Because whatever, just to get them,
yeah.
it just gets them,
Stop.
to stop. That's all that it boils down to.
You see the guys that usually go, meh,
Right.
which I think is ridiculous.
And I've seen also where you know how a call has a flexible hose on the bottom of it. I've seen guys where it works. They just take the hose and they leave it flexed in their hand, and then give a really mellow call.
Yeah.
So it's like, and they have.
You can keep it all the way compressed, and it does the same thing.
Yep. And so it just doesn't allow enough air to get through the baffles.
Yeah.
Sometimes that sounds like kind of like a moan or a whatever. You just want to sound like a freaking animal.
Yep.
And you want to sound like an animal that's hopefully smaller than that one is, so that way it doesn't get startled out of your neck of the woods. But yeah, man. Got blown out on another hunt. It was way past, darkness. Yeah. And legally, where we hunt in Franklin County in North Carolina, you can legally shine a deer until 2300 at night, until 11 o'clock. Yeah. So on an evening hunt, I'm not going to sit in the middle of the woods with a spotlight, don't get me wrong, but on this evening hunt, we were done. We were packing everything up, and we were getting ready to leave and the whole nine, and it was too dark. Yeah. Even to see your hand in front of your face. And right as we were putting everything away, the zippers are going, and the Velcro's going, and stuff like that. God damn it, jeez. Yeah. What is it?
Yeah, it's turkey hunting, but in whitetail hunting is just rife with frustration, right? And you do it for that, I assume, because I've never actually shot a deer. You do it for that one moment of breaking that trigger and seeing it, throw a hump and then run off 100 yards and go down, or hopefully, if you do it right, it just drops it.
Yeah, it just curls up. Yeah.
I've been lucky so far this year in terms of like going to and from, where I have my cameras and where I'm going to have my stands. I've seen lots of sign, and I always exercise stand control unless it's, January, and it doesn't matter anymore for me. But, I've been lucky. I haven't bumped anything on my side of the property. I haven't had anything blow at me, so I feel like I'm doing the right things. Or the deers are just smarter than I am and aren't blowing and aren't, grunting and aren't doing anything. Yeah. They're just slinking off, which is a real possibility.
Well, and around this time of year, one of the reasons why you see so many more deer during the fall and the winter isn't always necessarily because of the weather conditions. It can be, but around this time of year, they become much more social. Yeah. Deer are social animals in general, don't get me wrong. You'll see a doe and a couple of fawn. Let's say, for instance, some fawn are abandoned, some fawn get lost, all sorts of stuff. If they find another doe and fawn, then typically they're okay.
Come over and hang out.
Yep. But when you see them in herd, or if you see 2 or 3, what they'll do that I've noticed is they'll send an advance party, so to speak. So they'll send like say a middle-aged doe, and maybe a couple of other does just to learn what they're doing, who might sprint across an area to see if it's clear, might just kind of like tumble through, and then you'll see like 6, 7 deer coming, and the mature doe is always at the rear of the formation, and always scoping out wherever the most, like, hey, that looks suspicious.
That's sketchy. Let's go this way. Yeah.
And her whole job, anybody who's ever studied deer population knows about mature doe. Her whole job is to spot danger and to blow out whatever that danger is so that the entire herd keeps moving because she knows exactly what's going on. And then the bucks, for the most part, travel alone unless they're tailing a doe.
Yep. Or it's, the winter, and then you see bachelor groups, start to come up after the season is over.
Yeah, typically we see that in the South around February or March.
Yep. Yeah, it comes up here a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
January, just because it's cold. And
yep.
They're all looking for the same food sources. Which is, I think, for me, I think the thing that's holding my scouting back is that where I hunt, the property is surrounded. Surrounded by 495 on one side, and houses, and a high school, like all around it. So I can't hunt over people's yards. So I gotta figure out the travel corridors and all that. And it's because it's timber. It's a forest. It's harder to do because there's no real natural pinch points, like where there's old farm walls and all that, which they just jump over, so it's not a real...
Right.
So, finding, I think, traditional kind of whitetail hunting tactics doesn't always work where I'm at.
Oh, yeah.
Just for that reason.
Oh, I agree. Well, when the population starts to get mobile, I definitely see that as the biggest reoccurrence. When they start getting mobile and they start traveling around, not necessarily always in herds, but when they're traveling specifically looking for food, they're ready, willing, and able to pretty much go anywhere.
At any time for any reason. I mean, they don't follow logic. I mean, they're not people. They have their own sort of...
Well, and what I think's funny about it is, more often than not, when I see animals in the woods, are a hell of a lot more logical than we are, because it's like, okay, where are my multiple food sources? Where are my multiple water sources?
Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to hide?
Yep, multiple bed spots, multiple places along the trail that they always go to. That's the other thing, too, is they're creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that. It's not that they're necessarily always going to be out and about at the same time necessarily, but you got to eat, you got to find water, and you got to make the next generation.
Yep.
So if you can figure out those keys.
So you guys have been coming up a little bit short,
Yeah.
No pun intended. Have you guys tried any like off the wall ridiculous tactics? I mean, I know some people rattle out a season, or start bringing turkey calls in, because where there are turkeys, there's always deer, and they kind of have a symbiotic relationship. You guys tried anything like that?
More scent, and we're authorized to bait. So, I mean, you can bait pretty much anywhere. I mean, there's issues with it on state land.
Yeah.
Mainly because you're leaving a bait pile that's unattended. The most outrageous thing, I think, we've been calling. I think, frankly, we've been calling too much. Because you can.
Yeah.
Like, one call every 2 hours can actually be more beneficial.
Than every 15 minutes, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I go a minimum of 45 minutes in between calls.
Yeah.
But typically we'll pick a spot in the hour and just say every time you hit that spot in the hour, give a call. I think the most outrageous thing that we've done is scent sticks. Mm-hmm. It's something that I haven't really used before. And I've always wanted to, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But you know me, I don't necessarily hunt permanent places all of the time.
No, you're much more likely to just brush something out temporarily.
Yeah, so we've done a little bit of rattling, because I've got a set of just old horns, old antlers that I wound up pulling off of a deer. Which this thing...
Yeah, so before we started recording this, I gave Penney... I don't actually remember what the brand name is. It might be Hunter Specialties.
Yeah.
It's like a rattling box. It's 2 pieces of plastic with teeth on the inside. Give him a little sample for there, Penney.
So it just kind of grinds against one another, and then it sets into position. That's actually one of the things that I really like about this. This is the first time that I've ever seen this thing, I
think I got this from Hunt Vault late last year.
And I've seen the rattling bags before. Mm-hmm. I've seen they call them rattling antlers or whatever.
They make bags out of like dowels too, people are doing now.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen other stuff like that. You had mentioned like the turkey call. Mm-hmm. It's actually something that worth employing. We haven't done it. I have used. So have you ever seen me with turkey calls in, like diaphragm calls? It's not good. It's not good. It's not good. It's not good. And practicing around the house is a definite no-go.
Oh yeah, I will practice calling turkeys in the house just to piss off my wife.
Right.
And she knows the combination for gun safe, so I can only push it so far
before
she shoots me.
Well, and I can get, how a turkey kind of gets up into it?
Yeah.
Like when it cuts, it just cuts. Or when it gobbles, it just gobbles. Yeah. But if you're calling a turkey, let's say a pot call or a box call, a diaphragm, whatever, it usually starts with like a bark, bark,
Yep.
bark, 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 right? If I get that going, stop, just stop. Just stop. Take that.
I skip over that part. I go straight for like the full on.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, no.
Just cutting, at the dinner table, and she gives me the death look, and then I take it out of my mouth and put it back in its little case,
Right.
and then move on with my life. Baby's a good turkey caller.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's fabulous.
Yeah, it's funny too because you start what I find whenever I use attractants, or whether that's a call or anything else like that, when you're mimicking another animal that's in the woods, there has to be other signs of the animal that you're mimicking. It's not a whole lot of turkey sign.
No, it looks like somebody wrote a till or a garden and there's some poop.
Right. And so, can you see turkey tracks and stuff like that? Sure you can. Can you find them in the fall? It's a hell of a lot harder because of ground cover. Can you find them in the hills or in the woods of North Carolina? Occasionally, but we've got a lot of pine straw on the ground.
Yep.
So anytime that you find deer sign, more often than not, it's around a water feature because everything's been washed away. Well,
that buck that Trey shot, you found his track in that stream bed that was running down the back of your property. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I also saw that big old basket when I was out for a walk.
Boy.
Yeah, my boy and I, we were walking down the street. He was 3 at the time, just turned 3, and walking down the gravel road that goes off. I used to live amongst horse farms out, and each one of us had 20 acres. So it was a phenomenal arrangement for hunting and not a phenomenal arrangement for socializing. But I used to take him for walks down there, and I'd see how many deer are milling around the area.
Yep.
And saw what I thought was just it's not Boone and Crockett, don't get me wrong, but it was a solid 8-point buck. No drop tines or anything, but each one of them was over 1.5 inches long. So that was like serious as far as the rack's concerned. The thing about that deer though, man, I've never, ever seen a deer just gallop.
No, he was like full out sprinting.
Yeah. And, well, you remember, we were in the house and the shot cracked.
Yep.
And he comes running out from underneath like, I got him, boys. Freaking good old boy.
Yeah, for those of you, for some reason, who didn't listen to the last episode, Trey is a North Carolinian through and through, and he's definitely got that up-talking country boy thing to him, which is one of the things we love about Trey.
Well, right. Well, and what I think is great, so if guys want to hear more about Trey, they can check out Cigars and Sea Stories, but he's an Army National Guardsman, and he's deployed to combat, and done a couple of other deployments and stuff, and we bumped into each other, actually, just kind of through fellow connections and stuff, smoking and joking. The majority of my connections have come out of, call it like a literal interpretation of Cigars and Sea Stories. Like I'm hanging out with the guys around the bonfire, smoking stogies, and oh man, you know who you should talk to is this guy. Like there's no other distractions aside from a fire pit, and so we get to talking about work, and that's fine, especially when you're an entrepreneur. Those of you who are working a 9 to 5 and want to leave it at work, I understand. But what's great about Trey is he is humbled himself as a neophyte in the woods and said, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to hunting. And so we wound up linking up and doing a heck of a lot more hunting, and he's my primary hunting partner these days. But it's fun being around folks who have never hunted before, because you would think that there's a lot more shit talking.
Yep, no.
There is not.
It's one of those things that people, I think, forget is that of all the people I've met, I know a lot of folk, the gun guys and the hunters, not the gun guys on the internet. Those guys are by and large. But like the hunters that you actually meet, like out in the woods or at the shop or, at the deer check station, are the nicest, most generous, kind, helpful people that you'll ever meet.
Oh, yeah. And I think that stems from the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I say it that way because sportsmen travel out there.
Yep.
All your game, your equipment, quote unquote, you have the spoils of the hunt, that is to say the game that you're hunting, but all of your equipment and everything that you possess is wrapped up within the individual.
Yes.
So it's not, hey, I'm going up against you necessarily.
We might be hunting the same deer, but
right.
It's not a competition.
It's not a competition to the extent, like I grew up playing hockey.
Yep.
Hockey is a blood sport as far as I'm concerned. I mean, like, it is a brutal, brutal sport, and that is why I love it.
The NHL used to be a little bit more.
Right, exactly.
Now it's Tyler Sagan hockey, not
Of course. Now it's, oh,
Thornton.
God. Don't even get me started. Don't even get me started. You've got the Evgeny Malkins, and then you have the Bob Proberts of yesteryear, and Bob Probert would smash his face.
Yep.
Yeah, Gordie Howe, which I pretty sure I specialized in the Gordie Howe hat trick, which if you don't know what that is, that's a fight, a goal, and an assist all in the same game.
You ever do it in one period?
Probably. Probably. I grew up playing a lot of hockey, but I bring it up like that because there's a hell of a lot of shit talking on the ice. There's a lot of just spitting back and forth, hate and discontent, and then at the end of the game, you line up, shake hands, and that's great. Maybe you hate each other in between. Sportsman, it's not like that because you're all going for this. I mean, I revere the game that I'm going for, no matter what that game is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think for me, hunting isn't about killing. It's about everything that leads up to the point of breaking the shot. Because once you break the shot and the deer or the pheasant or the quail or the turkey or the elk or the whatever that you're after goes down, that's when the work begins.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think that, for lack of a better word, civilians, understand, it doesn't end when you shoot that deer in the chest. You now have 6 hours of work, breaking it down, freezing it, cleaning it, dragging it out of the woods by yourself, And a 90-pound doe, that's a hell of a drag, by yourself out of the woods. When people talk about dead weight, it's an expression, but it really, takes a whole new meaning when you're dragging a 90-pound or 180-pound animal out of the woods by yourself. Yeah.
Oh, and that's, you bring up a great point because that's one of the reasons why I have the equipment that I have is because I field dress a deer and typically hack its head off if I know that I'm going to be hiking back out. Yeah. If I'm going to pack all the meat out, those are the first two things that I do. And that happens within, I mean, you've seen me field dress a deer. I make pretty quick work of it. And when Trey shot that deer, and it was really warm out and we needed to go, and it's like there's flies coming and all sorts of shit. He goes, man, this is going to be a learning, experience for me. And I'm like, well, we ain't got time for you to learn. Yeah. Okay, unfortunately, I've got to just take the guts out of this thing. We'll hang it up. Yeah. See what it looks like when I get back from the airport kind of deal. And I mean, if I'm not trying to collect, I keep the liver, I keep the heart, I keep the caul fat. Yeah. Everything else gets ripped out. I take the bladder out, and if I can save it, I put the whole bladder, all contained, into a Ziploc bag. And it spills everywhere in the Ziploc, don't get me wrong.
But you can use that as scent.
Yep. Yep. Oh, absolutely. If it's doe piss, I mean, typically, if it's doe piss, within the first 24 to 48 hours, depending on if you're going back out, I'll soak wicks. If I know that I'm going to go back out or anything like that, I will take paracord, basically 550 cord, and I'll put 5 to 10 wicks on it, depending, and then I put that down inside of the bag so that it saturates within that doe piss. But typically, doe scent, that only lasts, what I've seen, for up to about 24 hours. Yeah. And when you put scent in, you want to...
Sorry, my wife just walked in for those of you who can't see what we're doing.
So when you put scent into the woods, what I've noticed is you want to come back out probably around 8 to 12 hours later. So I'll put it in at night. Deer are all maybe milling around. They might be bedded. It depends on the time of season, what have you. But right around, you put it in, let's say 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Right around 6 to 9 a.m. Yeah, you're gonna be hitting something. So, which I've done a lot more natural scent like that than I have. Like I picked up from Walmart one day some of those doe sticks. Yeah. And I did that more so because I was chatting with it. Well, going back to what we were talking about, specifically with the sportsmen and how we interact with one another. There was another gentleman who was standing in the aisle with us at Walmart, and he happened to be wearing like a Vector shirt, which hunters will know what Vector is. And they make awesome range finding gear. We used to hunt people with Vectors. I actually used to take range to target when I was doing call for fire on enemy combatants using a Vector. And so anyway, we got to chat, and he happened to be a fellow northerner, southern by the grace of God. And and he was telling us about how he uses the scent sticks, and he was using something else though. He had like a wick that he was. So he had a scent stick that was out on the trees so that he could see it as deer were coming down the trail. But he also had a wick that was below him. Yeah, that was more of like a. You deviate off the trail, and then you'll come towards me. That's the way that he works it. Kind of like, oh, she went this way, kind of a deal. And he's been getting great results with that because he watches the deer. And this is my favorite way to kill a deer personally. I would rather have a deer turn in front of me, coming one way down the trail, and then go on either side of the tree, let's say, for instance, or on either side of the blind. Because typically what I do is put myself off of a crossroads. So you'll have 3 or 4 other trails that are coming around there, and I put myself into an area that a deer just wouldn't want to go. Yeah. So what he's been doing is drawing them towards him. What I like doing is watching them get away from me so that I know I've got a quarter and away on them. And I've even gone 180 degrees around a tree. Yeah. Because one of the biggest things that hunters really mess up on, in my opinion, if you're going to hunt ground blind, and I do a lot of like set in that day, not pre-established blinds. I do it that way because I can put a hide site on a veg line in under 2 minutes to where a human being's not going to be able to see me. You're not going to be able to find me with 40 power binoculars looking out your back window. So I apply a lot of the skill set that I learned in the military, even though I'm wearing blaze orange. So my pack, what I do is I take the ground blind and I scrape out a good 6 feet. Yep. I set my pack down. My pack has my stool that's across the top straps, and then I set that out so that I can sit on it up against the tree. But I had a deer walk down the trail, and it went essentially off the trail. I thought it was going to walk to my left, and it walked around to my right. Well, I'm a right-handed shooter, so you're 180 degrees around the other side. And what I wound up doing was turned around, saw where my feet were, saw that I wasn't going to be able to actually make the shot without making a sound, and then leaned around the edge of the tree a full 180 degrees and used my non-dominant hand as a rest against the tree. Perfect quarter and away shot, which for those of you who aren't bow hunters, the quartering away is hands down the greatest shot that you could ever find, because you're going to slip it in right in between its rib cage and hit everything.
Shoulder in front of the nose.
Yeah, well, and I think archery targets do a far superior job in showing where to place an arrow.
Zone is, if you will.
Right. And you look at a deer, I think it's funny where hunters have their let's say, for instance, they put out like a rubber target and they're going to shoot something into it. Let's say a spread pattern or anything else, right? They set the deer up. The deer is always looking at them.
Yep.
And it's always perfectly perpendicular, perfectly broadside, right? And that's stereotypically in your mind.
What you're going to see. Yeah.
Right. That's what you
hope you see.
That's what you hope, right? But you're hoping that the deer is not looking at you, right? And now, when I set up one of those targets, I set it up on the oblique so that it's quartering away from me, essentially. Mm-hmm. And then I take its head and purposely turn it the other direction so that it is a real-world scenario. Like, when I go to kill this deer, it will be looking away from me, not know that I'm there, and I'm going to sneak one just over top of its, essentially what its knee is. Yeah. Because, its elbow is tucked up tight against its torso, and a lot of people don't. First of all, the deer's shoulder doesn't actually connect through any bone.
Yep, you can slice right through it.
Yeah, so the shoulder blade is encapsulated in muscle, essentially. And then the knee itself is up underneath, tucked up under the torso. And so I'm always the guy who's looking for the perfect shot to where I can hit a heart and a lung at the same time. Dude, did you see what a 35 lever action will do to a freaking deer? You can hit it pretty much anywhere. I mean, like,
if you hit it in the chest and don't punch it, it's
right.
Gonna go.
That last doe that I hit, the one where I was like, hey, as she went behind the tree, I shot that thing right through its lung, underneath of the shoulder. It bounced up, just immediately went up, because you have no idea where a bullet's going to go. Once it hits anything, like shooting through windows, that's a myth. Yeah. You have no idea where that bullet's going to go once you hit a window.
Yeah, it starts to tumble.
Oh, right.
It loses all aerodynamics pretty quick, and it's just
right.
It's a roll of the dice.
And normally it takes a 90-degree angle to where you actually, so if you hit it, let's say, for instance, on a 45, it'll take an opposite 45-degree angle. So anyway, I hit this deer in all the right places, and the round, which normally stays together and everything, actually went up and blew 4 inches of her spine out. And I'll give you the video so that you can post it if you want, but the reason why I say it is because when you spine a deer, when you neck a deer, right, which is like T-boxing, the head curls. Yep. And when you do that, you got him. If the head darts up and the rear legs kind of go a little bit, that deer is going to take off. That's what I've...
gathering power. And it's
right. Whereas if it curls its head down like that, I mean, it's done. And, they start kicking and twitching on the ground and stuff. I mean, whatever. You don't need to dispatch a deer even further. You just need to let it bleed out and let it do its thing, and it'll be fine.
And I think that's one of those things that, the mistake I made last year was missing the deer, right? I mean, that's mistake number 1. And then missing on my second shot, which is mistake number 2. And then she took off. And instead of waiting half an hour to try to track, or waiting an hour, I went right after her. So even if I had gut shot her or hit her liver or something like that, she was going to get another dump of adrenaline and just take off running. And then, I would just never have gotten her back.
No.
So.
Well, and then you had the 2 deer theory, is what I call it. You're always going to, if there's one deer, there's going to be a second deer. That's kind of the 2 deer theory, because they're social animals, especially around this time. I've killed a deer, had it dead on the ground, and had another deer literally walk up to it. Like, what happened to George? Wham! That's what happened.
And that's the thing, like, people, my wife included, they think that, they have these deep relationships, and they probably all hang out, and, oh, that's George.
Oh.
But, like, they don't care. They don't have that type of relationship where, if you shoot a deer, the next deer to come up isn't going to be sad. They're just going to say, oh, it's a deer. Is there something that's going to kill me now? No? All right. And then go back to eating.
Right. Well, and the separation anxiety that happens amongst all species. You can see it amongst bovine and amongst swine and amongst, deer population as well. Don't get me wrong. But, like, I killed a yearling. Yep. Right? And I know for a fact her sister was right up the trail. Like, I could see the other deer. They were looking at each other. And when she looked over at her, that's when I took her.
Yeah.
Because she was distracted by the other deer. Do I hold any remorse? Not even a little bit. She was delicious.
And that other deer, did you guys end up killing that other doe?
I don't think so. It might have been.
Might have been Trey's.
Yeah, the first doe that I shot.
That doe moved on immediately.
Immediately. Might have been, sure, might have been sad. Might not have its, sibling with it or whatever or anything else like that. Totally understand.
Yeah.
But from a naturalistic standpoint, there's no
connection there.
Well, but not only that, there's no room for it. That's the other thing. I mean, my God, man. Again, unfortunately, I wind up taking another long look at it from a humanistic perspective of you don't have time for, let's say, for instance, the quote-unquote grieving process in the same way when you're in a natural environment. Like when you're in a survival situation, let's say, for instance, which deer in the woods
are in a constant survival situation.
Constant survival situation. They're constantly doing fight or flight. And if you don't believe it, just get blown out by a deer one time, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Or twice.
Right, or twice. Both in the morning and in the evening. That's what sucked. But it's funny because I have seen in a stockade a pig get shot in the head or get its throat slit or something, and the other pig start drinking its blood. And it's like you're trying to logically figure out why they would do that, and hey, wait a minute, wasn't there some sort of like connection pig to pig or something like I remember being a boy thinking about all of these different connections, right? Because I was, when you're a kid, you're susceptible to Disney movies, so Bambi is like a thing. Like, oh, I lost my mom. Like, Bambi is bullshit, folks. I'm going to tell you right now. Like, that's a freaking Disney movie. Which, by the way, fun fact, the kid who voiced Bambi became a United States Marine and a killer.
I was going to say he was a DI too, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Sergeant Bambi.
something like. I think he was prior enlisted and wound up going officer, if I'm not mistaken.
We need to look this up.
We need to look up the Bambi Jarhead. Is what I'm going to call him. He did not admit that he was the voice of Bambi until he actually got out of the Marine Corps.
Well, I was reading something that somebody found out and like started to give him shit, and then he went to yell on him, and that put an end to that. I think that I think that dude ended up in Vietnam.
You want to bring that shit up, huh?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Here's your frontline ticket.
Enjoy Da Nang.
All right. Oh man.
Oh God, yeah. So we're starting to get to that point of the show where we've done about 45 minutes. I want to ask my usual kind of wrapping up questions, or the questions that I mean to always include in these. Just to give kind of a little bit of closure here. What is your favorite hunting-related memory?
Oh man. Okay, so I can tell this story. Why not? All right, so I have an uncle who I have phenomenal uncles on both sides of my family who taught me how to hunt and fish and camp and do all of these other things, let alone my father, who is, I think, phenomenal in the woods, more so than in society. His admission, not mine. So my uncle, he's got this, he calls it a Buddha. It's basically an old single-wide trailer. It's parked out on the hunting land. And one half of his land, I think it's like 20 acres, is a food plot, and the other half is a wood plot. And I was home on leave from the Marines, and we were there for Thanksgiving, typically hunt around this time of year. And my uncle looks at me and he goes, "You mind if I do a J?" And I had known that he smoked before. Don't get me wrong, man, But I didn't realize that he was smoking weed before he went hunting. I'm like, well, all right, that's fine. He sparks this thing up, and I go, and it's actually got a pretty decent little shitter on this trailer, right? So go, and I'm doing my business, whatever, and he's like, oh my God, And I'm like, oh, shit. Like, is he dying in there, you know, kind of deal? So I'm, you know, buttoning my jeans up, doing whatever, button up my trousers. And he has the burner going on the stove with a pan on it, and there's butter in it. And he slides open the window on the trailer, takes the safety off his shotgun, and wham! There was a 4-point, like, 20 yards in front of the trailer. And so we relieve it of its guts and immediately rip the tenderloins out of the thing.
As well you should.
Which is just, you know, necessary. And pulled the heart out and wound up just immediately devouring the tenderloins on that deer. And then we went hunting.
That's a great story. I like that. I'm hoping for something similar where I can blouch a deer.
Yeah.
You know, go check it, bring it back to the house. On my way home from the trek station, honey, start a pan up.
Right. Well, and it was funny too because I was like, dude, there's no way that he's even blazing this joint kind of a deal. And then I come walking out of the head and he's, I've seen the guy. I mean, granted, he kills like 20 deer a year. Don't get me wrong, because landowners permits and everything else, especially in the state of Michigan. But to be able to take an animal and immediately harvest it and immediately reap the spoils of it in under 20 minutes from its death. Yeah. That's
pretty cool.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah.
That's great. Something to strive for. What's your favorite piece of hunting related kit?
Ooh. Favorite piece of kit? I'm going to have to go universal.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's like, it's more than that. So I'm going to say my Mystery Ranch pack.
Good pack.
Really good pack.
That's a comfy pack.
So, yeah, not only, it's got a subframe.
Yep.
It basically has 2 bars that run up the inside of a padded frame. I'm a traditionalist. I prefer an Alice pack when I'm walking around hunting terrorists. The Mystery Ranch pack, one of the things that I love about it is I can access different compartments on it without making any noise.
Okay.
Zippers really I prefer, or, you know, buttons and stuff like that. You want to hear how I bought the pack? As you know, the Army leaves a lot of stuff laying around, and my buddy took a 5-finger discount. He was like, "Is this yours? Is this yours?" I guess it's nobody's gear. All right, we're going to acquire it. Gear adrift is a gift. No, so he wound up acquiring this Mystery Ranch ruck because we were doing interforce operations and stuff, and so he got it under legit means, but he had it out on the grinder one day, and if you're not familiar with the grinder, it's this big, huge parade deck, and it's where we all stage all of our gear prior to actually making movements or anything. So he's out there, and he's got this Mystery Ranch pack, and it's beautiful. It's multicam, and, you know, just padded subframe the whole 9 yards. I look at him, and I go, "I'll give you $100 for that pack, literally right now." Right now. He's like, "What?" And I pulled a C-note, $100 bill. And don't ask me why I had it. I think it's because we got back from our birthday ball or something, and I was like, "Oh man, you can take hundreds out of the ATM in Las Vegas. That's extraordinarily dangerous."
That's $18.99 with Penney, thinking things all the way through.
Right, exactly. No, actually, I was 25 at the time.
Still thinking clearly.
Right, thinking solid. And so he's like, "No shit, man." And I give him this $100 bill. And our platoon commander walked up, who happened to be one of my shooters in Quantico, so we had a pretty decent relationship. He walks up, he's like, "Dude, is that a Mystery Ranch? It's like a $350, $400 pack."
Deal's done.
Right. And that's literally what it said. I was like, "Dude, you took the money, man. The transaction is over." Like, that fucker's in my truck.
That's awesome.
Yep.
You know, that is the most comfy backpack that I've ever
Mhm.
carried. Are you going to bring that when we go out west and
Yes.
humping around the boonies of whatever state we decide to do it in?
Yes.
So for the uninitiated, Michael and I have decided to do when I turn 40, I want to do something I'm never going to do again, other than see my toes. And we're gonna go out west and we're gonna do an elk hunt, maybe a little elk and mule deer combo hunt. We'll see what
Yeah,
funds
man.
and tickets and tags allow.
Yeah.
But that's coming down the road. I think we're excited for that, and I can't wait to get her done there. I'm really excited to buy a new gun.
Right. Well, and I've got a buddy with property out there, man.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to go out to Wyoming, it's a plane ticket, and it's not the whole rigmarole outfitter, blah blah blah. Because a lot of folks, I mean, and I totally understand. A lot of folks get into an area and they just want to go straight to where those deer are, or they want to go straight to where any species or any category of deer that is. I want to go out and glass some stuff. I want to go out and, John knows where to go. It's his own property. Don't get me wrong, but we'll have a good old time going out there with a solid piece of glass. One of the things that a lot of guys say is they're like, oh man, I want to take an elk from like 800 meters away. I'm like, yeah, not me. I want to take an elk from like 8 meters.
You bring your bow. I'm going to buy if Savage, if you're listening, a Weather Warrior and 300 wing mag would be really nice right about now.
Be sweet if you could send that.
Yeah, I want to be 200 yards away and take an elk.
Yeah.
800 it's not hunting. I mean, it has no idea that you're there.
Right. Well, and but the thing is this though, like I have no problem killing an animal at 1,200 meters. But what I'm trying to get at is you've got to trek your happy ass across all of the terrain in between you and here. You think 800 meters of flat land exists in Wyoming?
No.
I mean,
maybe
maybe on a farm, right? Exactly. But it doesn't exist out in the countryside, out in the mountains. So, that's one of the things. And I fully plan on doing a heck of a lot more what I call location hunts, where you go out, set up a GP tent. You're going to be in there. You're going to hike probably 300 yards minimum in order to get into a spot, and just doing some of that. Well, frankly, like that meat eater type stuff.
Yeah.
Steve Ranella being a fellow Michigander and everything. I fiend for that type of terrain also, because in Michigan, you're kind of, there's all sorts of different types of terrain. Don't get me wrong, but there's nothing like out west.
It's flatland. I mean, you're a Flatlander. I mean, I'm a Flatlander from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Maybe people in far northern Maine, Canada, Maine,
Right.
maybe claim some mountains. But, down
Or like
in
northern New Hampshire, stuff like that. Well, right. Well, and so anyway, I love the Mystery Ranch for being able to get into pretty much any terrain, and I'm not a guy who typically uses the waist belt unless I'm going completely slick. I use the waist belt a heck of a lot more because I'm not wearing body armor.
Yeah.
And I'm also very rarely am I ever in the scenario to where I've got to dump my main pack and immediately start charging towards whatever the fight may be, let's say, for instance. So walking around with a solid hunting rifle and a good piece of glass, let's say, strapped to the pack, and then you've got maybe a lever gun for anything that gets... A lever gun will definitely kill a bear.
Okay.
Like a 35.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's what... 2759 feet per second of traveling velocity, coming out of that thing. Traveling, not just muzzle.
It's a big bullet, too. So
right.
Got a ton of kinetic energy behind it.
Right. So, which is by far my favorite rifle that I carry, has to be my 35 lever action. I mean, unless I want to reach out and touch something at distance.
Then it's your Mosin.
Yeah, it's either the Mosin or... Well, it's the Mosin right now. Because I don't have any other long guns. Now that I think about it, I'm looking at getting something that's going to be chambered in a 308. Matter of fact, Henry Rifle makes a lever action that's chambered in 308, and it's a box mag.
Really?
It supposedly has a max effective range of 670 plus meters.
Wow.
So, which coming out of a 2 mag, without a free floating barrel, I'll take that. Whereas. Well, I mean, let me put it into perspective. When I was going through DM school, I had to hit a running, moving target at 850 meters. So at night with a gas mask on. So you have to be able...
Make it easy on her.
Right, exactly. Well, the whole idea in being a designated marksman, which I've told you before, is you basically have three primary objectives. You have embassy, security, and lockdown, right? So you're the guys on top of an embassy security taking precision targets. And then you have nuclear refuel, defuel. That's basically like a nuclear-powered vessel would be in port. And then you have anti-sniper. And designated marksmen are a sniper's absolute worst enemy on the battlefield. Snipers will tell you that the number one thing that they never want to encounter is an enemy sniper. Designated marksmen travel amongst the squad and specifically hunt for enemy snipers. So I would love a gun that I can actually put through its paces.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would love a bolt action. You know, one of the things that I saw recently was the little, I think it's called a striker. I don't know, an episode for another time, but it's the world's shortest long-range weapon.
Okay.
And it's about the size of an MP5.
Okay, so we're talking like true subcompact.
Oh, yeah. And
kind of
not an MP5 Navy model, the November model, but a traditional MP5, right?
Fixed stock.
Mm-hmm. But,
10-inch barrel? Something like that.
yeah, I'm going to say it's 10-inch barrel on the original. But the point is with this thing, we're going to have to look it up online because I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But it is the shortest precision rifle that they make, and it's a bullpup design, so the receiver and everything is up inside of your shoulder pocket. It's a very interesting concept, and it gives you free full whip out of a free-floating barrel. Because there's one thing to have a free-floating barrel, and that's great. Let's say if a glass, right, that's better for punch. It's going to give you high velocity, but not long-range marksmanship. You want a free-floating barrel for long-range marksmanship, and then you want proper barrel harmonics. That means a free whip, because as you shoot, the barrel actually whips as the projectile goes through it and is being rifled. And so a free whipping barrel, essentially, you'll actually see the muzzle climb up and to the right. You need a micrometer in order to actually measure, how it's moving. Right. But the reason why I want something so sophisticated like that is spin degradation on a bullet. A 308 travels low and to the right like anything else, depending on how it's rifled. It's rifled from left to right. So I want a rifle that is going to essentially eliminate its own spin degradation, which is what you get out of a lot of modern quote-unquote sniper rifles, let's say, for instance. But again, you got to go hike over there. You got to quarter out the animal. You got to take out, what are we going to do? Are we going to cheesecloth it? How many guys do we have on the hunt? One of the major reasons why you take so many people out on a Western hunt is because you got to hike everything out.
Yeah, you kill a 400-pound, 500-pound elk, pull the bones out, that's still 300 pounds of meat.
Yeah.
The meat that you gotta hump, and you're in bear country, or you're in wolf or mountain lion or coyote country, and
One of the most clever things I've ever seen a guy use was one of those mono wheel carts.
Yeah.
And right near the wheel, he had his pack, but then he had his collapsible ladder tree stand. Mm-hmm. And he would hike it out to a spot, set up his tree stand and everything else. But the wheel cart was essentially attached at the base, so then he could pulley up. So it was a pretty cool setup. And then he'd leave his stand in the woods, a month prior, let's say, for instance, so that the deer are really used to it. But there are some other pieces of kit that I definitely am looking at, and like anybody else, I drool over. Yep. So, and do not have the money for.
No.
So.
Well, I got to hit Powerball so we can take care of that business.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I'll just keep playing. Trey and I have a deal where if it hits $200 million, we each start buying tickets up here and we split it. So
nice.
I think that our discussion cut you in for a little bit, so I think.
Great.
You facilitated the introduction, so.
Hell yeah.
I think that Penney, do you have anything that you want to blurb or promote? I know you have a recent book release.
Oh, yeah, by all means. So, I'm an author and a professional speaker. I'm an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, and a military veteran, and all of these other things. If you want to learn more about me, check out michaeljpenney.com. That's Penney. Like J.C. Penney, only no relation. Yeah. I didn't see a cent. So, michaeljpenney.com, and you can learn more about me and what I'm up to and see the different appearances. It's pretty cool. Actually, just got highlighted by American Grit.
Yep.
So that was pretty neat. Been in Huffington Post, Biz Journals, and the book is the 5-paragraph business plan, which is based on the military operations order.
And actually, I have a copy of that upstairs that I need to get you to sign so I
Cool.
can sleep with it under my pillow.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't materialize money. You have to fill it out. Yeah, it's a guidebook. It's also correspondence with 5paragraph.com, which, again, all of that stuff, you can find it all at michaeljpenney.com.
So hit him up, buy his book. Penny, thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
Coming on the show. Penny actually drove all the way from North Carolina just to do this episode with me and my daughter. If you heard grunting and in the background, it's her making baby noises.
Yeah, not to see my in-laws.
No, had nothing to do. She came up here just to see me, for which I am forever grateful. So, Michael, thank you very much for taking the time. You want to go hit the woods?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey, everyone, it's Andrew from Neophyte in the Woods. Just popping in real quick, wanting to do a quick kind of bumper out here. We here at Neophyte in the Woods and the Change Your POV Network do this all out of the goodness of our hearts. We legitimately love and are passionate about the subjects about which we speak. However, that doesn't mean that we're not absorbing some costs. And one of the ways we're trying to address the overhead costs associated with putting out these podcasts is to do Patreon. And you can find a link to it right down at the bottom in the kind of the episode show notes on our website. If you could donate anything that you're able to support us and help us get this content coming out to you, it would be very much appreciated. There are tiers of membership from $1 all the way up to $10, and you can donate more than that. For our backers, our Patreon patrons, we do offer some unique content. We've been doing weekly shows where we do a live stream and we talk about a quote on Mondays. It's normally right around 8 p.m. Eastern. There's also some other cool rewards, including the level at which I back at $10 a month. You can actually get, believe it or not, a signed autographed picture of our fearless leaders, Bennett and Eddie. It really changed my life. It sits actually right up above the computer where I record all this stuff. I take it with me when I go hunting. I take it with me when I go fishing. I take it with me when I go to work. It goes everywhere with me. Some people have an EDC pocket knife. I have an EDC picture of Bennett and Eddie. I would really strongly suggest you back us and keep the good work that we're doing coming. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for leaving us reviews on iTunes. And we'll talk to you next week.